Okay, guys. So change of direction. Okay. So here is an example of step one of your change of direction project. Okay. So this is basically very obviously similar to what I want to see you guys part of your submission be. Okay, at least for step one. I want to see your reference in there. I want to see the footsteps, and I want to see your character blocked out with a starting pose and an end pose at least. And all of the contact poses that are going to be needed to take the steps to translate your character through the action. Okay, so let's jump in your scene and get you started as far as what you're looking at here. So when you open up that change of direction Maya file, it's going to look like this pretty much. So your character will be probably showing, you'll see footsteps behind him and a seamless backdrop. Everything once again is set on layers. You can turn on and off the feet. You can turn the background layer off. Background layer is a texture, so in 5 mode you're not going to see it. Hit your 6 and it will see the ramp color. And you guys can feel free to change the color or do whatever you want to the ramp, or even just replace it with a Lambert. That's fine. Okay. There is a Bob layer here too. We're going to get to him in step 2. Okay. But step 1 is the block out of your T300 character. Okay. What you're going to have to do first is get yourself some reference. So part of what we'll be doing for the next 2 weeks is working with reference and also working with Bob again. Okay, so this Maya file, much like the first one you started with, this one we're going to use for 2 weeks, for the next 2 weeks, for both week 3 and week 4 turn-ins. Okay, and you're just going to continue to work in this file. Obviously you should be saving this thing out in iterations as you complete your steps. Okay, so if you haven't done so, download the video reference, and I've kind of organized it into how many steps. So you'll see there's 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 steps. Okay, and thumb through those. You'll download the whole thing, thumb through it, find something that suits you. There's everything from a little bit more straight ahead stuff, as far as being a little bit easier and a little less tricky, but there's plenty of challenging and tricky moves there, and you'll see that I'm trying to lead with a bunch of different things. You can even see they're titled hip lead, complicated start, sort of a jump turn, hip lead, hop start, upper lead, aggressive, reacting. So you're going to see it kind of point you in the right direction of what's going on inside the reference. So import your reference into some orthographic view. Okay, I'm going to turn off the background here. Don't import it into the perspective window. Okay, import your reference into an orthographic window. It works better that way. If you import it into a perspective window, you're going to get something weird where no matter where you move your camera, you see your image plane. So put it in an orthographic window. I suggest the front. Under view, go down to image plane, choose import movie, and then you're just gonna go and find the one that you're choosing. So I'll go into my reference folder here and just grab that first one to get started. Open it up. So this should work, and anybody using a Mac, you should have no problem with the video reference. It should import in and work fine. If you can't see it, obviously check to see that your image planes are turned on in your window you're working from. Okay, position it and scale it so that you can see it and reference from it. And again, reference, I should say for the first time, the use of reference is a starting point. Okay. The reason why we brought Bob into the mix this month with you guys was to get you to think more like an animator, okay? And we're going to be doing Bob here and using reference. So again, I'm going to keep coming back to the idea as how we create weight in a performance and use the principles of animation. And when you look at reference, you're going to see that maybe there's not a lot of squash and stretch, up and down movement sometimes. Maybe things are a little stiffer, but again, we exaggerate, we think like an animator, and we bring that to our performance. Okay. So what you're going to be doing first is just using your footsteps. Okay. I want you to map out that path. Okay. You can leave them. He's got feet for a starting position, and what you should do is basically you might want to map out your starting foot position first. You don't even have to pose your character. The idea behind why I want you to map out your foot positions first before you even start creating your character steps is because I want you to basically stop for a minute and define what your character is actually doing, okay? And think about the mechanics and how and the correlation to the footsteps, and that basically is the map and the guide to figure out your path through your performance in any performance you're going to create in 3D, right? So obviously if that's his starting position, I can scrub through. Oh, actually that's his starting position. Maybe I should have paid attention to scrubbing in my video. Okay, so my starting position is a little more like this. Okay, and you don't have to be, you're going to refine this as you go. So do it in passes. So I know that my character, I'm looking for my first step, which is there. As far as the foot slide, that could be considered a kind of a step, but don't worry about defining something that gets a little tricky like that. That's something you can work out as you break down your scene and create that. In order to slide your foot, you're going to see there's a lot that even happens. There's a whole starting idea here, which I don't want you guys at this point to worry about. I want you just to worry about more the mechanics of how your character is going through space. You can animate this stuff later on your second pass, okay? But how this really happens is the upper body swings around and then the hip pulls and comes up on the toe, and now we're standing on that leg. We push off that leg to take this step. So let's not worry about that stuff on your blockout pass here. Worry about defining the contact, which is basically a pose like that, where I know that the first step I'm going to take is with the left foot, and it's going to basically come over and pull out and turn this way. Okay, and again, refer back to it. Is it coming forward in space? Kind of, right? So try and be very aware of that. Obviously it's more of a down shot, so you can tell that right now this foot is even more behind that one. So my starting spot for this foot probably should be a little bit back there, and this one should be a little more forward. It's probably a little bit more turned sideways, and then it's going to basically reach out and then head in that direction, and there's my contact. Then I would find the next contact, which happens right there, and now I would continue to bring this forward. Okay, so let me jump into an example here. I have a time-lapse example just to kind of quickly show you guys the progression of this kind of thing. So you're going to see again me mapping out that first position of my feet and then scrubbing through, finding my first step. Here's a big broad step to the right, and then a step where the other foot comes up to meet. Okay, and then my third step will happen where I continue forward and take that quick step forward, and then there's another one that pops out to bring the other foot forward once again, and then my other step, I'll bring the other leg again into place, and that's my final step. Notice then I turned off. You guys can start with them turned off or start with them turned on, but there are on your controls, there are foot poles you can turn on and off. Okay, so you can turn those off, select them all. At this point we're not going to be worried about that. We're going to use that in step 2 when we bounce Bob actually on the footsteps. Okay, so I turn those off, and now I'm going to start posing my character. I'm going to create my first pose using my obviously my reference as a loose guide, trying to get body position and line of action and mechanics from that. And this is my first pass too. I'm not going to worry about posing the character's face. I'm not going to worry about posing the character's fingers. I just want to rough out the mechanics and the basic pose. Okay, I'm not even worried about the shot camera I'll be working from. Okay, you guys will be choosing a shot camera to stage everything in. I'd say don't even worry about it until you map out your your first pose. Your first pass, and get those sort of that mechanics working. You're going to walk your character straight out of the first, as far as right at the origin, and using your reference as a guide. Okay, so here it's me building that first very broad extreme contact. Again, these are contacts, so these represent the stretch as your leg stretches in to catch you before the weight comes onto that leg. Okay. So you want to define that this is in motion. These are very broad actions, at least in this case. So I want to make sure that I'm building that kind of pose to support the action. And the thing about a video that you pull from is in context. You can scrub through and understand when that moment's happening and what that pose should feel and look like. Okay. Again, you're moving one foot at a time, so the other foot is going to remain stable. Okay. Careful if you start translating both feet at the same time, you're going to be moving 2 feet at the same time, which creates a problem with sliding. Okay, there is some weird stuff that goes on where your foot will reposition, come up on the toe, come back down, but be very wary of moving and translating a foot unless you're prepared to sell it, as you might say, and get the weight off of it to move that foot. Look to simplify when possible too. If things get a little complicated with the foot dribbling too much, just don't worry about it. Just assume that it's going to come up and come back down and stay in place. All right. But I'm just trying to define each step, each contact moment. Scrubbing through, I'm using the timing, obviously, of the reference to map out when I build those poses. I'm keying the whole pose. I'm posing the whole character except the face and hands, my first shot. Okay. If you guys want to throw the face and the hands in at this point, you can. I tend to like to work in passes and just get a nice quick rough block out to get my character through space. What you're going to find me do too, and I have mel buttons, you can kind of see me using them up there. I have a mel button that Z's out the character. Let me even jump in there and just show you guys that stuff. So if I jump in into Maya here, now these aren't poses or anything, but when I'm rotating my character, if I'm kind of creating a pose and then taking the spine and then countering it this way, and it's more of a forward C, so I'm kind of bending him down more this way, and then the head's jetting, the neck's jetting forward, and then the head's kind of coming up and out, you know. And then if I want to go to like another pose from here, okay, if I then turn around and key that and I go to my next pose, I have something that that basically will zero out my character. So if I was taking a step next, the first thing I would do obviously is start moving my foot into that position, right? Like that, which is what I'm doing on the video. So that represents my next step. I don't even worry about how it's contacting yet. And then I'll turn around and I'll hit what I call Z chord. Where is it? Z chord there. This is a mel button that Z's out my character's rotates in my hips, and then I have something it's called upper that grabs my character's arms, his hips, and his elbows in this case. The knees follow the feet the way I have them set up, so I'm just going to leave that. And now I can very quickly kind of bring my character into place. So if my hands were posed a bit too, everything's like that. And now I can start thinking about what the contrapposto is, that this hip might be rotated this way, that this hip might be dropped to, and then I can come up to the spine and do the opposite and say then I have the opposite going on in the spine in that case. If the body's rotated more back, then the hips are rotated more forward. Now I can start to kind of design that, okay? So that's what you're kind of seeing me do. I will wind up zeroing stuff out. I zero out the hands too and repose those as far as the rotates are concerned, because that keeps the values a lot lower. So really using mel buttons to do some of this stuff can really speed up this quick rough block out, which is really the lion's share of getting this character into place so that you can begin to animate. And this is what it really is. It's like designing the layout of how your character is going to move through your action and designing it nice and solidly, which takes a lot of time and effort, even before you put all the time and effort in refining this to make it start to move correctly as an animator does, okay? So yep, just going from one footstep to the next, moving the character in place, zeroing it all back out, rebuilding it to support the mechanics of that moment, deciding on what type of foot contact. Your foot contacts the ground in so many different ways, whether it's the heel, the toe, the side of the foot. There's plenty of controls down there to get you guys a nice foot contact depending on whatever situation you're up against, okay? Really look to use the head and neck against each other sometimes. Sometimes the neck is jetting forward and the head tilts up. Sometimes the neck pulls back and the head dips, and all that stuff. You should be finding reference. You should be finding that within the reference. It's going to help you build a pose that has good mechanics that suits the situation that you're trying to create. Okay. You can also find a lot going on in the shoulders at times, so really look to get those into the action. A lot of times I'll kind of leave those to my second pass too, and I'll just get the rough block out of the core and the mechanics and the pose and the foot position, and then I will look to pull the shoulders back and pull the arms back a little bit more and stretch them a little bit forward when needed too. Okay. Alright guys, so that is what I would suggest your first pass at this should look like. Just a quick jump into Maya with your reference, lay out your foot path, and then go from there. I'm going to open up sort of the second pass on that. So I'll open up that file. So this is the file of the blockout where I took a second sort of pass at this. Okay. Here's where I kind of tried to push the poses a little bit more. I started adding the facial expressions, as you'll see. Okay, so now you can see me kind of taking a lead from my reference. If I even turn off my controls for a sec here. Okay, you can see again, I'm kind of pulling that expression from my character or from my reference. Here you can kind of see I'm kind of thinking direction too, like this face has a line of action to it, doesn't it? Okay, where I'm leading more into this. I probably could have even gone the other way where I could have squashed it and led that way too. So again, that's all up to you as a designer, as an animator, how you interpret things. Now that I think of it, I'm always, always kind of rethinking stuff too, and that's part of doing things in passes too, where you can look at that and go, maybe it should have been this way, and push it and go, yeah, that's better. Okay, and that's part of learning. Okay, obviously looking at yourself in the mirror and getting ideas too can really help. Okay, but I'm looking to pull from obviously the reference. I'm looking to kind of have fun and design my shot. Okay, or my pose at this time. You can see the fingers too. I'm thinking about those using reference, using the reference as a guide, but also again, the idea with reference is you can scrub through and feel like, oh wow, yeah, the head is doing this, the body is doing that, the arms are moving in this direction, so the drag will be this way, or the arms are stiff and moving this way, so it will be rigid. And do I want to keep that in there, or do I want to loosen up and drag something more? Okay. And as you can see, my scene is not in step. I don't work in step myself. I don't care whether you guys work in or out of step. I do ask that you turn in this version of this in step, because I just want to see your contact poses and your start and your end pose, because I want you guys to really focus on blocking out that progression. Okay. I also opened up his step. If I actually, let's open up the actual first pass of this. I'm just going to throw this right in on top of this. Okay. That's just like importing something into a scene. So I'm importing the first block out with basically the second in the scene. So let me turn on my curves here a bit. This is my shot camera I chose. There are 4 shots for you guys to choose from. So shot 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm working from shot number 3. Okay, so keep that in mind. I have a visitor who's trying to come over here, so let me leave my foot layer on. I'm just going to turn off my background layer. Okay. Actually, let's look at this in the shot camera. Okay. So we can kind of see how I've kind of changed the poses. Even the first pose, notice that I've really pushed the line of action a little bit more over onto this leg. Okay. And I tried to give him a little bit more of that line that you're kind of seeing in the reference here. Okay. And again, I don't overthink things when I'm starting. First block out, it's very quick and rough and intuitive, and trying to pull directly from what I'm seeing, or I think I'm seeing at least, and then I'm going to refine it from there. I really liked, again, when I came back to kind of really look at this in the shot camera, and I really kind of look what I really liked seeing that wonderful line here and everything that was going on all through here. So I wanted to push it. Notice that I even pushed this to a longer kind of step here, a longer stride. So as far as your foot position too, it's a quick rough out, but you guys should be adjusting those as you're posing your character and saying, you know what, no, this needs to be more here, it needs to be sidestepped, or this one comes more forward, and make sure that you're making the right decisions on how the mechanics and how your character is moving through space. Okay, so I wanted to push that and even push the pose and get more of that line working. Okay, notice that the arm and the hand are inside the leg through here, and I'm looking to basically keep them out of the body. Again, think like an animator, design this. Okay, boom. Here, notice that I brought him way forward. That line of action is way on this leg. Here, the leg is way out here, and the body's back here. Although it's kind of a little bit closer to that, but I still have that going on here, and it's more asymmetrical, which usually is a lot more interesting. That feels a little bit better to me. It feels like it has a nicer line. Okay, and if I put it in context, I can see that my weight is coming and tiptoeing and falling forward as I take that step too. So I really want to feel that that's the direction my body's headed in. Okay, here's the change of direction here, and I really wanted to push that again, that weight. Okay, you can see I kind of kept that weight more over on this way again to try and get what I'm seeing here and emulate that. You can see my hands all being posed now. Another stretch in. This one again, I'm really trying to make sure I push that. Pose the hands a bit, lose them back in space, and kind of emulate what I'm seeing there. Boom, boom, and then there's my last pose, my last contact. Push slightly too, and settling back. So let's get this guy out of the way. I just want to look a little closer at these poses with you. That is the actual posed guy, so let's shift select. And now I can get this guy out of the way. And we can just look a little bit closer at this guy. Alright? So this is my actual second pass. And even the second pass is a work in progress. One thing I would even suggest you guys do is use your grease pencil as a helpful guide to think about pushing your poses a little bit more once you've roughed them out. Okay, if you just launch your grease pencil, you know, and just look to draw over. Make sure I'm showing my grease pencil. Look to draw over, and it just could be a small little squiggly line like this. Just look to think about what you're seeing and comparing it, and really just draw over your poses, and you start finding that there's a rhythm maybe sometimes you miss. Like, look at that, that's a nice rhythm there that I don't quite have all through here. Why can't I get a little bit more of that in this, which is maybe working the shoulder and the elbow a little bit more. Even here I kind of feel like this wraps through here so nicely, and I don't have that. You know, again, maybe is it the placement of the shoulder and the elbow, and even here, am I too foreshortened on the hand? Do I need to come around a little bit more and dip that hand down to try and get more of that? There's something nice in here in the leg that I'm kind of missing. My leg does this. My leg in the reference feels stronger because that is what's pushing the force. And again, thinking like an animator, it's like, why do I want to be weak that way? Why not try and get the leg more in an arc that way and push off into that? You know, even this, maybe is this turned a little bit too, you know, maybe it should be turned more towards camera too, that leg. The head might be, you know, maybe could I pull the neck back a little bit and try and get the head out a little bit more, because it is dragging somewhat and kind of stretching and pulling a little bit. So just by doing stuff like this and then going back, you know, think overall rhythm and line and gesture, and then go in here and try and push that. You know, in this leg it's kind of easy to start thinking about how I get this leg maybe to fall more in line. Obviously the knee could be more pointing this way, and I can really rework the foot control here. Now I work with the auto key on again, so this is all just building on what I have here. So as soon as I start even pulling this leg more like that, and that foot and that knee, I get more of that line of action. Okay, in this case I think I'm using that back control here. Well, yeah, it can get more interesting if I try and do that. or that. Here, I'm going to work with those shoulders a little bit more and see if I can kind of drive those a little bit higher and back. And the elbow, can that elbow come up a little bit more to get me a little bit more on line? Is it also the positioning of the hand kind of get me there? And then really working with that hand to kind of get it maybe more in line too. And really how you're staging it is really important about how it really controls the line too. And that's kind of falling a little bit nicer into line too. If I come back to this and rework that also, really pulling up that maybe, which that feels better already. It feels tighter like it probably should. I want to get rid of a little bit of that foreshortening on the hand too, so it stages better. And I can probably pull it out there and really push that arc a little bit more. Okay. Not sure about the head and but really if I pull the neck back slightly and then reverse the head a little bit, will that make that feel a little bit better? So let's turn off that grease pencil in here too. Sometimes it's good then to get out of there. And again, now I'm getting a little bit more maybe of that cleaner line. I could probably even work a little bit harder at stuff like that, but that's not a bad idea for you guys to think about, is just loosening yourself up and going back there, because you shouldn't just create poses and say here it is and turn it in. You guys need to be refining these things and plussing them, thinking about the mechanics overall, and then thinking about pushing it and how you're staging it. Hit your 7 key, turn off your reference, and really kind of look at that too, okay? Or sometimes it's even good, again, to look at your reference. Maybe just move your reference over so it's not quite in your way, so you can kind of see clearer. Let me just stage it this way so I can kind of think about that pose and what I'm seeing there. Okay. Again, I can't help but see like more drag here, so really maybe working to really push that asymmetry and get that, you know, there's so much you can kind of miss from your reference that sometimes when it is, you know, fairly good, and that's obviously a pretty strong pose. And my pose is okay, but that definitely feels like it's more in motion than mine is. Okay. Alright guys, so those are some ideas to kind of attack your scene and think about. Again, this pass should be about refinement too. It's the quick rough out and plotting out of it. It's the overall mechanics, but then it's really refining this thing in the shot camera. At the end of it, I want it instepped. I want to see your reference, I want to see your footsteps, and I want to see your contacts and your start and end poses. Okay guys, I will see you next time. Alright, bye bye.